gotta tell somebody.
This is the best thing I've ever seen.
That. Let's talk about that.
You need this. Listen to this.
Memorable and exciting.
Well, then be less boring.
I'm going to tell everyone. Wait here.
Mighty remarkable, Big Daddy. Remarkable?
Remarkable.
Welcome to Remarkable, a podcast for B2B marketers that deconstructs the most iconic moments in film, television, pop culture, and advertising for a single purpose: to give you, the B2B marketer, the same storytelling techniques that the pros use. In each episode, you will learn techniques from Hollywood, Pixar, Marvel, and beyond, from Spielberg's hands to yours, bringing remarkable content ideas to you every single week. I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios. This is Remarkable. This week, talking B2B marketing lessons from the marvelous Miss Maisel.
All right, give it up for a very funny lady whose name you're gonna want to remember.
With the help of our special guest, head of content and brand at Close, Chelsea Castle. Chelsea, how are you?
What's up, Ian? I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. You got a lot of C's. Content, Close.
It's the best alliteration.
Castle,
I'm just going to keep adding more. That's
right. Maybe community? Huh?
Maybe community.
Adding community.
Yeah.
Communications.
Comms, communications, for putting all of that under a castle nomenclature somewhere too. It's got to work somehow.
Yeah. All, behind the moat, as they say. Today, we're going to be talking about Marvelous Miss Maisel. We're going to be talking about what you're doing at Close and everything in between. Why the heck did you pick the Marvelous Miss Maisel?
It is probably one of the best shows I've ever watched that also replays in my head all of the time.
I am still a lady.
Women aren't funny.
Your wife must have a sense of humor. She's seen you naked.
Growing up, I was also a big fan of Gilmore Girls. Probably lots of core memories there. I grew up alongside Rory Gilmore, who is one of the main characters of that show. And the creators of Gilmore Girls are also the creators of Marvelous Miss Maisel. So it's very witty, fast-paced, quick dialogue, just something I've naturally gravitated toward. It's just a brilliant production in so many ways.
And zooming out, tell us about your new role at Close. You just started. So this is fresh. This is new. It's super fun to be looking at everything from hitting the tear button, the reset button. Yeah,
super fresh. So I'm just over the 60-day mark. But somehow I feel like I've been here much longer in a good way. It's like the tech world, is in dog years. Previously, I was at Lavender and Chili Piper. And yeah, so at Close, I'm kind of in a new building phase. The marketing team has kind of taken a shift. For anyone not familiar with Close, we are a fast and efficient CRM, primarily serving in small teams that are 50 and smaller. So for those teams who are maybe not a good fit for a Salesforce or a HubSpot, we tend to be the best solution for that. And I mentioned that to say it's a company that's been around for a while, about 13 years. So it's seen a lot of evolutions of marketing. So this year, we're kind of in this new era with new leadership, some other leaders on the team, some OGs on the team as well. And there's not been a lot of brand definition at Close. So that's what I'm tasked with and how we kind of bring that to life and bring it to market through content. So that's what I'm focused on right now.
Fantastic. We're going to dig into a lot of that later on. Meredith, what the heck is Marvelous Miss Maisel?
So Marvelous Mrs. Maisel is another show that almost didn't get made. And I feel like we talk about this kind of content a lot on Remarkable.
That is Meredith O'Neill, our amazing producer extraordinaire.
So it actually had a super easy beginning. So creator Amy Sherman Palladino, who also created Gilmore Girls, pitched to Amazon, and this was her idea: the story of a 50s housewife navigating the Greenwich Village comedy scene. And it was an idea that was inspired by her dad's time as a stand-up comic. And Amazon gave her the green light right away. So that was the super easy part. And Amy told Elle, they were great, go do it. She said, "It's never happened before in my life, ever. I'm not used to okay. I'm used to fighting for everything.
I have dresses to buy and hats to buy and shoes to buy and purses to buy."
So she was super taken aback by that, but she was like, okay, cool, I have the green light. But here's the problem. The problem is that it's called The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. And the problem was finding Mrs. Maisel. So she and her husband, Daniel Palladino, who were working on it together, were looking to cast her. And she was basically impossible to cast. And so they had this idea of who Miss Maisel could be. She had to have this piquant freshness. Is that how you pronounce piquant? Piquant freshness. She had to be clear-eyed, sharp-witted. She's overall described as like joyful, and she's not down for long. So Daniel said, when Midge gets knocked down, she gets right back up again. She's just going to morph back into someone who's going to take control of the room. That was the intention. And I think there's not a lot of that out there, especially in roles for women. So it was a super special role, and the show really depended on finding the right person. And so it wasn't until they found Rachel Brosnahan that they felt they could move forward with the project.
Susie, Miriam, you know what's great about me? Your humility? No, it's when I'm me. So why would I wait until I finally have enough power to say to them, I want to be me? What if they never let me be me? They will. I want to be me every time I walk out on that stage. You will. No, listen.
And like Rachel was super, super green at the time. She was only 26. She was an NYU grad. She had just been performing an off-Broadway production of Othello. But Amy said that she knew she had the right person during the audition because she said, so the idea, of course, is like, this woman going into stand-up comedy. And she said, as a stand-up comic, you have to lean into the microphone. She said, if you don't have the balls to do that, you got to get off the stage. The minute she did that, we were kind of like, we're sold, because it didn't matter what happened after that. All we knew is she was the one who had the balls. She had the toughness. She understood the basic thing about comedy, which is you're up there alone. If the audience turns on you as a stand-up, they're turning on you. So she really did that right. And they said she just kind of had this innate understanding of who Midge or Miss Maisel was. And they said she's not secretly unhappy, which is sort of the core of the character. She's this joyful personality. And to get back to Rachel, like Daniel said, we were extremely intrigued because she didn't have any comedy on her resume. He said, to say I'm going to play not just a comedic part, but a comedian, that takes a lot of hubris, which we like, and a lot of confidence. But for Rachel, getting the role of Midge was like super huge. I guess she'd been like trying to get into stand-up comedy for a long time, but she kept being told she like wasn't funny enough and that she should try out for more serious roles. So she was like, she kind of like knew she had this in her. And so she said that the role has been perpetually terrifying in the most incredible way, that I wish on everyone in this room. I wish you all the experience of being scared because of something you love every day. And so I think she's like working through this fear in this role. And I think that's really interesting. But basically, like Amy said, the casting was really important to her because she said, you can say it's good writing or whatever, but you can put any word on the page. And if someone doesn't show up and humanize that and make that something deep and rich, it's just fucking words. Pardon my French. But from all of that, like I take like one, I think it's a good idea to draw content ideas from your childhood. Like this wasn't a role inspired by her father. I think there's a lot of richness in what you can pull from that. I think finding the right people for the roles in your content, I think is super important because this was all about casting, right? I think leaning into your natural talents is super huge and something you can pull from. Humanizing your content by having characters that put humanity into the words is really important. And then challenging yourself by taking risks and letting yourself sort of be scared through it, I think is really important too. But Chelsea, you mentioned like, this is a show that like you kind of replay in your head a lot. I'm wondering if part of that has to do with who Rachel Brosnahan is. I'm wondering if like there are certain scenes that play over and over in your head, or like what sticks out to you about it.
Yeah, I mean, that intro you just gave me goosebumps, I think, a little bit. It's like you just perfectly encapsulated the show in such a good way, but also how it can relate to marketing, right? And like, you have to have the balls kind of thing, like that phrase, like when I read that, like, yes, like that's kind of how marketing feels sometimes, because we have to put ourselves out there. That's what marketing is. And I think with B2B SaaS especially, and I'll get back to your question, the people who are kind of getting attention or cutting through the noise, they're maybe not doing anything like out of this world. They're just putting themselves out there in a way that other people aren't, right? Like before we turn the mics on, you were talking about doing cool stuff and how cool stuff works. And you kind of have to have guts or balls, you know, in Amy Palladino's words, to do that. So I think that's really inspiring. In terms of scenes that go through my head, for anyone not familiar with the show, it's I guess spoiler alert if you haven't seen it. The first I think that's the first episode of the first season, kind of kicks off Midge's journey into stand-up comedy. And she's a housewife, she's married, she's following the traditional 1950s like housemaker narrative, right? And her husband cheats on her, and she ends up, and there's a whole lot of middle sections of the story I'll cut out, but she ends up at this bar called the Gaslight, and she's wet and she's like drenched because it had been raining, and she's on this like dirty dive bar stage under these bright tungsten lights, and she just starts like talking, and she's kind of drunk, and she like wanders up there by accident, and people just start listening to her.
So my life completely fell apart today. Did I mention that my husband left me? Woohoo! Okay. All right, but did I mention that he left me for his secretary? She's 21 and dumb as a Brillo pad. And I'm not naive. I know that men like stupid girls, right? But I thought Joel wanted more than stupid. I thought he wanted spontaneity and wit. I thought he wanted to be challenged. You know what I mean? You two are going to be together forever.
That whole scene really plays in my head a lot, I think, because it's very empowering. And again, to kind of go back to your intro, it's like she just kind of had the balls to go up there and she just started talking, and she was hilarious and clever and witty, and a lot of the fast-paced dialogue that is in this show gives me a lot of creativity. If I'm ever in like a creative like stump, so to speak, of like I can't, like a block, I tend to watch this show because it just kind of like livens up my brain. So that's one of many scenes that replays in my head a lot. I
love that. I have so many things like that as well, where for me, what energizes, this is literally why we made this show. It was like, what inspires other people to create cool stuff? Like, what do they go back to get inspired? I love that you said that. That's how I feel the same way. And I think that you get to a certain point in your life and you have that thing nagging in the back of your head that goes, I think I could do that. And like, it's so satisfying to watch a story where the person says, screw it. I'm not just going to sit there and think I can do it. I'm actually going to do it. And everyone has painted me in one, corner for my entire life, and by my own design and, and where other people put me. And like, I'm going to go do something else. And like, it's so human and it's so exciting because you just don't know if they're going to succeed or fail. You know what I mean? And like in the case of Marvelous Miss Maisel, like we get to see this from Jump Street in the first episode, the creation of this stand-up that's, kind of unlike anything we've ever seen, and like we know stand-up in 2024, of how women are stand-ups, but not 1950. And I think it's really special. And I'll just say quickly that like the setting is so important here, to have it be New York, have it be somewhere familiar.
There are so many pieces of New York that are still alive from the 1950s that haven't been touched very much. And with some amazing production design, we have been able to bring New York into this show in a way that I've never seen in a period piece.
Anytime where you can set something, in a period piece in a time like that. I mean, the 50s is really long ago. This is like one of my mom's favorite shows. She grew up in New York. She grew up in the 50s. So like this is very nostalgic. She watched the show. She absolutely loved it. But like this is basically her mom's age. Like this was like, essentially this would be if her mom were to do stand-up, like my grandma, like, that would be, I don't think she ever would have done that, but this would have been, the same sort of thing. And so, but my point is there's not a lot of viewers that have that same experience of like, that they lived in New York in that time, but you just feel what it feels like. And you can identify with the person who thinks that they can be something else.
Oh, yeah. There's so many things I could unpack there. I think we could probably talk about the period piece element of it, like the entire episode, right? There's so many correlations and lessons and themes where that I think lends itself to like authenticity and storytelling, right? Like to your point about, I don't know what New York was like in the 50s, but I know Greenwich Village and I know what Greenwich Village is like now and maybe 10 years ago. And it's really cool to see, a painting essentially of what it may have been like to a degree.
The TV show is set in 1958 and it's a delicious time period.
The minute I put on some 1950s garb, I'm there.
It's kind of neat to have a little snapshot of what it might have been like.
And yet, to your point about how it relates to the impetus for this show, one of the things I love most about Remarkable is like the impetus, right, is the level of detail that goes into shows and film productions. At least this is one thing that I love about it. The level of detail that it goes into these productions that inspire us is the same level of detail that we should be inspired by in our own marketing, or at least I think we should challenge ourselves to be as inspired in our own marketing to kind of push through this space of let's create another SEO blog post and another podcast. Like, okay, what about the podcast is going to be different? What about the blog post is going to be different? And thinking about it through the same level of detail that goes into these productions and that sort of thing.
by the way. That's extremely kind of you, and I appreciate the feedback or the notes. It's funny. We started doing the show originally, and we focused more on just the content, like the sort of the words on the page or whatever. And we about I don't know, a third of the way into the series, Meredith and I talked, and we were like, I think we need to start talking more about the creation of the thing as well, because it's so important to understand how it's created. Because you see the final thing and it looks great, but if you've ever watched a movie, for example, without the sound design, or you've read a script that for one of your favorite movies and you're like, well, this doesn't match up exactly. You see all the cracks and how this, how many different people are involved in making something great. And you kind of need to dig into the process to realize that. And I think so often in B2B content, to your point, is like, we just kind of do the easiest thing. Like, we don't mean to, but it's like, that's kind of what we know. And it's like, yeah, it's easier to just sit down and crank out, a 1,000-word blog post and give it a round of edits and hit send. Like, that's way easier. When we were doing Murder in HR for season 1 and we were working on everything, I mean, there was hours and hours and hours and hours of calls with me and our head of development and our legal team and our entertainment lawyer and the lawyers with like everybody else who's involved in all this sort of stuff. Just miles of legal work and discussions around stuff that the audience will never know. They will never care. But that was the cost of doing business, right? Like, that was the cost of creating something that was cool, was like, you had to wade through acres of paperwork and legal stuff. And like, that's not the glamorous side, but that's how it gets made, right? Like, Marvelous Mrs. Maisel doesn't happen unless they go through however many, 100, 200 different actors to find the right one who is the perfect fit.
I'd have been a terrible suffragette, right? Don't get me wrong, I love having the vote. And voting, you get a pin. And I really admire all those women who marched to earn that right and protested and wore white, which may be their greatest sacrifice because white is a very tricky color.
Yeah, and to the point of period pieces, like the level of detail that they took in the show to ensure that that's accurate, to not lose the integrity of the story that they were trying to tell, because the period was essentially, that the era was almost a character in the show as well, down to like lighting. When I was really hot and heavy into the show, like before, like in the last, right after the finale of the series, I watched a lot of videos of like how they made it, from like the film production to even like the details of the costumes. I was just mind blown.
One of the ones that always sticks out to me, just because it just feels so perfect for the period and so chic and glamorous. It's black and white checkered shorts and a little jacket with a pink collared shirt underneath and this pink headscarf. And that outfit was incredible. I felt like I time traveled.
Thinking about the level of detail, like the costume designer was weighing whether the sequins on the final dress Midge, she goes by Midge a lot in the show, Midge wears, should they be matte sequins or should they be shiny sequins? Mm-hmm. And she was evaluating the intentionality behind that choice. And that just blew my mind, where it's like, you don't always have the luxury, right, of putting that much thought into everything we do. Some things have to be, you have a balance, I think almost like a buffet of the smaller tactics and the bigger tactics that take a lot of time and things like that and processes. But that just kind of blows my mind to think about, almost like a chef's dish, I'm watching The Bear, so that's really top of mind right now. But when you think about like, what is your stamp on this show or this piece of content or, your next podcast series, like what is your personal stamp on it? And then it takes a lot of intentionality, I think, to get there. And that level of detail is just fascinating.
Back to the scene that you talked about that sort of lives in your head. When we did the Ted Lasso episode, I'd say probably the most famous scene in Ted Lasso is the dart scene. And similarly, I think, maybe not exactly, and you could say like Mad Men, it's the carousel scene, there's like some super famous scenes, that you remember stuff for. But in order to earn those scenes, you have to do all the other small stuff, right? You have to focus on making it feel like the 50s. You have to make it feel like it's Greenwich Village in the 50s. You have to make her outfits be correct. You have to, have obviously a very fun and clever script. In this case, you had to literally create an entire series called The Gilmore Girls to get a second crack at this, to be able to tell a different story. And I'm sure they made a million sort of mistakes along the way. So I think that like, you think of those scenes and the powerful scene. And I think like as a B2B creator, we often don't think of the scene or anything as scenes really, but like that's what we should be painting. Is like this whole series boils down to her drunk stumbling on stage.
So this is it, huh? This is the dream. Standing up here on this filthy, sticky stage all alone. Couldn't have that. You didn't want me. Was that it, Joel? Who's Joel? What? Who's Joel? My husband.
We can't hear you.
And saying, and just starting to talk and people listening and her having that realization that, oh, people want to hear me talk. People enjoy this. And like, that's how it is in, I mean, I don't know if, you ever sat in one of those, a big conference room or virtual conference room, and you get the big sales pitch from the sales rep, and they go leave the room and everybody says, can we stay here for 15 more minutes? And you sit there and you debate and you go, are we going to do this? Or are we not going to do this? And people are weighing in, and like, that's a huge moment. And that's the moment that happens every single sale that happens, especially in the enterprise. And it's a huge moment. But if you can't paint the rest of the world, then it's like, it's not going to really land for your audience.
And I think that's where the show is a really good lesson in the storytelling that helps you achieve that, right? Where focusing again on that scene in the first episode, there is a lot of scene setting that has to happen for that moment to have a payoff. So you have to understand where Midge is coming from. The very first opening scene of the whole series, it's her basically making a speech at her wedding. I just got goosebumps thinking about it. Her making a speech at her wedding. And it is so the opposite of what you would expect from, a 50s housewife at her wedding.
I have wonderful parents. I've had a very comfortable life, and though I knew that love would be great, I had no idea it would be anything that could justify what I paid for this dress.
What I paid for that dress. We're very happy.
And because it's better than anything I could have imagined, I thought I should get up here today and tell all of you that I love this man. And yes, there is shrimp in the egg rolls.
What?
Miriam!
Where she's funny, she's standing on a chair, she's making like crude jokes, and her parents are there. And it's kind of instantly giving the idea of like, this gal's got something special. She has this it factor. And then you spiral into, oh, but wait, she is falling into this societally set mold, and she's kind of succumbing to societal pressures. And she's not kind of fully standing in her power or living to her potential. So within maybe, 30 to 40 minutes, they're able to do that so that final scene, that is for sure one of the most standout scenes of the whole show. Like, that is, I think, crazy. I often think of I want to get into the brain of people who write this stuff of like, how do you achieve that in such a short period of time in a way that you also have to rely on actors to deliver it? Like, it just is beautiful. So cool.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. This is our friendly CTA to go watch the first episode of the season. What's it showing on right now?
It's on Amazon.
Right?
Amazon.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. So, I mean, if you got Prime, fire that puppy up. Episode 1. I think it's a great point to dwell on a little bit longer about pilots. We do a lot of pilots here at Caspian, but I think the TV pilot is just so fascinating to me. We write a lot of fiction pilots for our fiction stuff, because in order to you meet with a client, you pitch them a bunch of crazy fiction ideas and murder mysteries and, sci-fi thrillers and all this crazy stuff. And then he's like, I think I like that idea. And like, okay, well, let's get to the first episode. Let's get to a pilot and see if this is something we want to move forward with. And you're so right that it's like, it's the biggest art form there is, right? Because you got to end that final scene, with the big hook. But I was just reading a post about this from Eric Bork. He's a screenwriter. He wrote a bunch of screenwriting books. He's great, and he wrote on a million things. But he wrote on a few episodes of Band of Brothers, sort of back in the day. And anyways, he's great. I've interviewed him on a different podcast before. And he wrote a blog post the other day that I thought was so good about pilots or about episode 1s. And he was saying that a huge mistake that people often make in writing a pilot is that they wait until episode 2 to let the character do the thing that they are going to do in the series. So the example is Breaking Bad. You could have set up the whole first episode and then had him cook meth in episode 2, right? He could decide to cook meth at the end of season 1. and then he could cook his first batch season 2 or episode 2, right? But they don't do that. They do it in the middle of the episode. They get him in the action, and now you know as a viewer that, oh, hey, this is what they're going to be doing. This is what this show is about. And I think what you're talking about with Marvelous Mrs. Maisel is the fact that because Midge can get up there, that you've seen her talk a couple times on stage.
To me 3 months ago for his teenage secretary. However, the other night he came home for some clean underwear and a fuck. Actually, just for the underwear. I threw in the fuck for free. Anyhow, Lolita found out, and boy, was she steamed. She couldn't believe I'd have the nerve to sleep with my husband. She thought that was mean and vindictive. And she has a point. After all, she has a teddy bear he won for her at Coney Island.
We got to get her on stage. We have to in episode 1, because otherwise it doesn't, it's like, oh, maybe this person could be a good stand-up. That's interesting. But seeing that she is good at it, and as a listener, or as a viewer, you really want to see her do it, and you want to see her succeed, but you just want to see her on stage delivering that and say, hey, I know what I'm getting into this show. This freaking rocks.
Yeah. That's also probably why there are so many YouTube videos of compilations of her stand-ups from the show.
Yeah.
Which also, if I'm like, I need some inspiration, I'm in a rut, I'll go watch those, because those are some of the most creative moments. And some of them are kind of flops too, which also just makes you, I guess, feel better and remember that she's a relatable character, and remind yourself that not everything you put out into the world is going to, take off. There's could be zingers and winners and losers.
You should have let me on that plane, Shy.
Oh, really? And why's that?
Because I had something to say to you.
Oh, I bet you had a lot to say to me. When you fire someone, they get mighty chatty.
Are you curious? What I would have said if I'd gotten on the plane?
Something about winged monkeys?
I would have said that I fucked up. I fucked up. Like I've never fucked up anything in a life, not without its fuck-ups.
Yeah, kind of setting that stage at the upfront also kind of gives you a taste to want more of that specific moment, like that specific magic that they've created and that Rachel Brosnahan has created in that character. That keeps you coming back for more, which I think there's like a phrase for this, I think, that Seth Godin talks about in your marketing too, where it's like you want to kind of create that in your marketing too. It's like these brand moments or like an element of your personality that is what keeps people come back for more, whether it's like the humor or what have you. I can't think of another good example off the top of my head, but you know what I mean? It's like you want to give people a taste and setting expectations of what else you have to offer. And then that is like kind of what you keep delivering on each time.
Yeah, and there's a lot of tension and release because the show is about her becoming a comedian, but the fun part is seeing her on stage. But we got to earn the parts to get on stage, right? Like,
we're doing this together. Are we not doing this together?
I'm here, aren't I?
Go behind my back. You hire a guy to help you. I'm here to help you.
How? By rushing me on stage when I wasn't even ready?
What are you talking about?
I hardly stepped in the door. You were pushing me to go on.
I wanted you to have a good audience.
Great job.
So it's my fault.
Yes.
Fuck you.
No, fuck you.
What is wrong with you?
She's got to go through the trials and tribulations of actually getting on stage. And then when we get to see her perform, it's this huge release for us because we're like, oh, this makes me so happy. She's finally on there. And then, oh, it makes me sad. She didn't do as well. And I think that there's something there to be said of like, your character needs to do the thing that they're supposed to do in the show. The best parts of Breaking Bad are when he's cooking meth. Something goes wrong. And then something crazy happens and they run out of gas and then this, that, it's like, those are the best parts of the show, but it can't all be that, right? Because then there's, it's too much.
Yeah. That also brings up a good point where you're kind of brought along the ride because you start to fall in love with Midge instantly. Yep. And you also start to like get addicted almost to those moments when she's on stage. Yep. But an interesting thing that the Paladinos do really well is they make you fall in love with all of the other characters in the show. There are so many minor characters. There are her parents.
What do you think?
Absolutely not. What? Put some
Think
thought
about
into
it,
this, Rose.
Abe.
What's there to
Fine,
think
but you
about?
too. Papa, do not have one of your knee-jerk reactions to this.
This is not a knee-jerk reaction. I heard your offer and I instantly knew it was stupid.
There are even like these mob bosses who start to hound her manager.
Julie! Hi. Sorry to startle you. Was that a gun? Yes. But it's a comedy gun, right?
Yeah, a comedy gun.
Frank here is my sometimes comedy partner.
Like on the weekends.
The gun shoots flowers out of it.
It's a very funny gun.
There's her family's like maid.
I'm not hungry.
What do you mean you're not hungry?
He had some candy earlier.
He couldn't wait until dinner?
Well, he's 4. That's little.
4-year-olds in my village worked. They made shoes, they herded sheep, they hid guns.
Young couple are scary.
I know, honey.
And every single person gets, like, their story is kind of wrapped up in a nice little bow at the finale, which doesn't always happen. For example, like Ted Lasso, you mentioned Ted Lasso. Love the show, but the finale kind of left you open-ended, and I hate that. But but this show, they made you love every single character, even if you got annoyed with them at times. And they did this in Gilmore Girls too. They bring, like, you kind of fall in love with one character, but I think it's a special type of storytelling magic to make every other character also play a very important role. The character development that they do, the cross promotion of storylines, they bring you into this like world and make you fall in love with everyone to the point that you're not just there for the protagonist anymore. You're not just there for, there's main character energy, but it's different because you just love everyone. And that's really hard to do, I think.
I know we've talked a lot of marketing takeaways, but give me some more. What are some other B2B marketing takeaways from Marvelous Mrs. Maisel?
A really interesting one is how they incorporate music. So if anyone has seen both the show and Gilmore Girls, the Palladinos really like to be quirky in certain ways. An element actually I didn't like about Gilmore Girls, I know this is not a Gilmore Girls episode, but it's related.
Bring it in.
They would have like street musicians incorporated in between scenes of certain episodes. And it started small at first. And as each season progressed, there would be more and more, like, there were a lot at the end to the point where like, okay, this is like a little too silly, guys. But they didn't care. Like it had a place in the show. Everything is almost like a character. These people were just street musicians kind of in the background. You would see them for a few seconds and then the scene would, kind of pivot into two main characters walking down the street. In Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, they really harness the power of visuals and music to further captivate the audience.
The stars shine, your eyes catch mine, then your light is all I can see. Could there be one less angel in heaven?
They have a lot of, like, there's some Broadway style tunes, even some burlesque numbers, a huge parody of sounds that they incorporate throughout, even like era appropriate pop, like just very effective, quirky, unique sounds to really bring you in. So I think there's some marketing takeaways there around like how can you harness the power of other senses and mediums to captivate your audience. Especially me, I'm a big fan of not just writing something or not just doing a video. Like how can we incorporate every medium in a way that makes sense, either in a campaign or something like that, where what can one medium do that the other one can't and how can they complement each other? So I like to think about that and like appealing to senses. Even like in events, for example, my last event I threw with Lavender, I even had a cotton candy cart there on purpose because I wanted the whole place to smell like cotton candy. So I was trying really hard. That was my strategy, is I was focusing on every single sense that we have as humans so that when you're there, you're just inundated with this like memorable experience. And I think we can do that with like everything in marketing too.
Any other marketing takeaways?
We talked about storytelling a lot. I think the dialogue is a key staple of the Palladinos. Again, Gilmore Girls, the show, very fast-paced, very witty. I remember when I was watching Gilmore Girls, I would be constantly looking up, like, what was this pop culture reference? Or what was this word? I think a lot of shows almost like under-index on dialogue, or dialogue's not always like a big piece of the story, right? Like a lot of shows you could probably think of, like Mandalorian. There's actually, dialogue's a big part of the show in a different way, where it's almost like less is more, and each word like has a lot of power. So I just think dialogue is really foundational. So I think a lot about how to like identify and emphasize like what the foundation of your brand is, where for the Palladinos, it's very much this dialogue, right? That is their legacy as creators. That is like their personal touch on something. It kind of reminds me of this quote. I think it was from Danny Meyer, where he talks about like driving a boat. And if you're driving a boat, you're leaving a wake behind you. And most of the time you can't see the wake behind you unless you're looking in the like rearview mirror, and you have to be aware of your wake. So it's all about kind of like the aftertaste of what you create, or like the wake behind you of what you leave. So those things together make me think about like what is the foundation of what you're creating, whether it's your dialogue, whether it's, simplicity, like thinking about Mandalorian, how like each word is few and far between, but each word is like really strong and earns its place in the story. So I think that's really interesting to think about.
Yeah, dialogue is so interesting. I was listening to Sorkin talk about this, and he was saying how, the Sorkin dialogue is like it's very him. And he was like, yeah, people don't talk like that. Nobody talks like that, but it's very entertaining for people to listen to. I feel like Gilmore Girls is kind of like that too, right? It's sort of got I've watched a million Gilmore Girls episodes, and it's, I think, been, 15 years since I last watched any, but it has that sort of same, I'm going to say iambic pentameter, but that's not what I'm trying to say, but like the poetic nature to it, that staccato, I don't know what any of these words mean, but it has that flow to it that is very unique, but it's super satisfying. And I like that you said that you had to look things up. I think this is how I write, and how I write comedy specifically, is I just throw stuff out there, and if the person gets it, they feel like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Like, I got that reference, and I don't get it. Probably goes over someone's head. But like, to me, it's just like obscure references are that little treasure that if you catch, you're like, oh, this is great. Like, a good example is Only Murders in the Building. They throw out so many super dated, ridiculous references in that show, and you don't care at all. Like, you're like, I don't know who, Carol Burnett is, or like, that's a bad example, but like, they throw out these like totally obscure like actors from the 70s, but you're like, I don't care. I know it's funny to me either way. But if you do know who that actor is, you're like, it's even better. So I love that sort of stuff.
That's almost the point for that show specifically, right?
Yeah.
Where you start to get to the point where you're like, all of the obscure references, even like you don't care that you know them anymore because they're coming, and it's kind of part of the experience.
Yeah.
Right? I love to pull on that thread a little more because I've been having a conversation with some fellow marketers recently around like references in marketing. There's a couple pop culture references lately where someone might use it in a social post, or someone might reference it in a subject line email. And I'm like, okay, well, we're using it and we are being on trend. And if somebody gets it and it lands, and that's great, that's what we want. But do we want to do that if at the risk of a lot of people not knowing the reference? And how do you weigh that? And does it play a part in the example you just shared of like Only Murders in the Building? Or are you excluding a lot of your audience, and people are going to be like, what the heck is this? Like, I don't understand what they're saying. You know what I mean? It's like, I constantly weigh that of like, do we take the risk and just go for it if we think enough people will get it? Or do we need to pull back a little bit? And probably depends a lot on the tactic too, but I think about that a lot lately.
Well, so I think about this too. And I think that the answer, lies in something that you were saying earlier, that if your style is such that, like Seth Godin was saying, if your style is a certain way, then you've earned the right to throw in these obscure references. I remember we got in TIFF, writing Murder in HR, about this reference to Atreyu from the Neverending Story. And the person was like, what is this? This is no, like, whatever. And I'm like, no, when Artax or whatever, the horse, Atreyu's horse, gets in the swamp thing, it's like the saddest moment in like television history. I'm like, if you get it, you're going to instantly understand the reference and feel the emotions that we're trying to convey. If you don't get it, it's kind of a throwaway line and it's fine. And like, to me, we'd earned with the characters and with the dialogue and the way that the character's brain thinks, that they would throw this out, and that the other character has earned the right to also not respond because they understand that person is weird too. So like, you as the audience are like, if someone says something super obscure to you, and you just go, yeah, and you just laugh and you just keep going. Because you're like, I'd be like, can you explain that to me? You just sort of let it go. That's what we do, like in life. So anyways, that's the way I view that stuff, is like, I would rather, hit the person in the heartstrings with the arrow and miss 100 and hit 1 than sort of just hit a lot of people in the shoulder and have them be like, yeah, that I felt it, but I didn't feel it in my soul. And you can't do that with every post, but that's the point of, if you're going to post, 10 times in a week, then like throw some obscure ones out there, right? 80-20 rule. Have 80% of your posts be stuff that are mainstream and 20% of your posts be super obscure. And probably the ones that would go viral are the ones that are more obscure anyways.
I love that. And that's super smart. Almost makes me think like we're overthinking it, maybe.
For sure.
A lot as marketers, right? We overthink it. Like the reward is usually more outweighs like the risk, right? If somebody doesn't get it, they don't get it. They're not going to, most likely, they're not going to hate your brand because they don't get your subject line reference. You might have just missed the opportunity, but for the people who get it, the impact should be pretty good.
Well, and the point is being memorable. The point is being remarkable. That's why we named the show that, right? The point is that you hit the send button to your friends. That's the point, right? So it's like, if you make the thing that's really obscure and weird, and a lot of people tune out to it, they just forget it in the course of their day. They're like, I'm not going to go like remember that. We have this ad, which I don't know if you've been targeted with on LinkedIn, that says it's a guy in a hospital room with a bunch of nurses, says, I almost died making our company podcast and I found Caspian. And we get a lot of people that like that ad, comment on that ad, share that ad with their friends, fill out a sales request form, be like, oh my gosh, that ad was so funny. And then we get a bunch of people who are like, this is crass. This is like rude. This is like, death is not a joking matter. It's like, well, dude, I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, yes, death in and of itself is pretty serious, but like it's going to happen to all of us. So like, we can, I think, make a joke about a podcast. So like, I think that those sort of things is like, you don't know what's going to hit, but if you do take the chance, that's probably worth it. And it's the accumulation of all of that, right? Like that's kind of what we're getting at is it's the accumulation of all of the back and forth relationship of the dialogue that allows those sort of things to hit. And if 10 of them miss, but one of them hits you really hard, you're going to be like, oh my God, that joke was so funny. And then you've earned it.
Yeah, you can't do anything cool without taking some risks along the way. So you kind of just weigh that balance.
I do think we overthink it though, for sure.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Kind of similar to what we were saying earlier around just like doing cool stuff. As marketers, we're so driven to just drive action, right? Drive a conversion that we kind of miss the opportunity to build some sort of connection with our audience. And that's harder. It takes more time, more thought, more intentionality. Some of the key themes of what we've been talking about here. But that's how you get longer term dividends and payoffs is building more connection through what you create. Yeah.
I think that so often marketers try to drive to an action, a form fill, I'm going to go buy their stuff right now. But what you actually want more of is just like that little smirk and be like, nice. That if you get 13 of those, that's going to equal your sale a lot faster than being like, oh, I have the perfect copy that's going to close the deal before they even talk to a sales rep. Like that's so unrealistic. Just try to get them a little smile, a little bit, a little brighten up their day. That's far more valuable.
I love thinking about it as like a marble jar of trust, right? Where like each drop in the bucket, each smile or smirk or resonance, like is kind of accumulating into a jar full of marbles of trust. And you also can't measure that, right? Like you can't measure vibes or smiles or those little moments. They're qualitative feedback maybe, or maybe you don't hear it at all. So that's where it like kind of gets tricky, but you'll start to see indicators, I think, in other ways.
When humor fast tracks trust, like this is, I think, really understated. This is why so few people use humor in B2B marketing, but they should be, because humor allows you to connect with someone in a way that they feel seen. Right? I understand the thing that you're going to. I understand that it takes forever to submit your expense reports. And it feels like, you're hammering your hand with a hammer made of nails. And it's like, get rid of the hammer, use us. Right? And you're like, yeah, okay, I get it. I get what you're doing there. So I just think that like humor fast tracks trust. And like, that's a way to connect with them that's faster and easier than trying to do it seriously. You know what I mean? Like if you sat down with someone and wanted to hear about their childhood and wanted to know about their relationship with their parents, you could have the serious sit down and be like, what was it like growing up? And you could probably achieve that result. Or you could be like, did your parents ever, leave you at an amusement park? Because mine did. And I had to sit there, I had the popsicle and I'm standing there and I'm licking it and I'm looking all around. And my parents were so worried. And I was like, hey, I got a popsicle. And like instantly you've diffused the situation and you've made a connection with that person. And they're probably more willing to share their story of when they got maybe not left an amusement park, but something else happened with them. You know what I mean? And so like humor allows us to bridge the gap.
Yeah, I think there's two lessons there. Like one is how we humanize marketing. And the second one is humor. Yes, fast tracks trust, but it also helps other things stick more. So one thing we did at Lavender is we would have educational content about cold emails. So for anyone not familiar with Lavender, it's an email coach, helps you write better cold emails. We would write about that. And then we would have humorous videos as well, kind of either poking fun at the same topic or, about something related to cold emails. And if you lined up the topics in a way that they like complemented each other, posted on the same day sort of thing, then it makes the educational part that much stickier. You're more likely to remember it. And that's how you kind of gain mind share, right? Of like making the humor combined. That's why like edutainment is really popular and successful if you can do it. It's also why it's really hard, right? And to the human aspect, I think that's another lesson from Marvelous Miss Maisel, where the character development, but also depicting a lot of the struggles and growth, both from Midge's journey, also Susie, who is her manager, who is living the complete opposite life as Midge, where, yes, we see Midge's journey from housewife to very successful comedian. She has a lot of privilege. Her family has money. And Susie, her manager, is the opposite. They show her living in like basically a closet in New York.
Right this way?
Wow. This is a really nice hotel.
There's a hallway. Never stayed in a hotel with a hallway.
And yeah, they go through a lot of comparisons there of their life, but just showing a lot of those genuine struggles and growth and how you overcome something builds trust and credibility with your audience. So I think there's a lot of ways to think deeper about how we do that in content and marketing. We get, again, really caught up on, I just need to get this out the door. I just need to do X, Y, and Z to check a box. Okay, like my X number of blog posts are done this month. And that's why I think that's why people think B2B is boring, where a lot of it's not. Or is it? Yeah, I think there's just a lot of opportunity to better humanize content and marketing.
Could not agree more. Okay, anything else on Midge that we missed?
Maybe the final thought that I kind of keep coming back to, I think we have a lot of similar red threads throughout the conversation and learnings from this show. But I, again, keep coming back to what makes this show so magical has a lot to do with the Palladinos and their personal stamp on things.
My kids, I promise their names will come to me. I think it's inevitable that they will hate me when they grow up. Like every other parent, I spend sleepless nights imagining what my kids are going to say about me to their psychiatrists. Right? You've done this. She wasn't home. She missed my baseball game. She made me listen to her tight 10 for a week before she opened in Toledo and then had us heckle her for 3 hours so she had some practiced comebacks. And our drinks were watered down. That's why I need to get really famous. If you're really famous, everybody loves you. At least until the will is read.
So I think as marketers, especially now in this like attention economy, harder than ever to stand out. And what does doing cool stuff look like for us as a brand? It's one thing to say it. And then when you're an in-house marketer like me, you have a team or you don't have a team, you're like, okay, shit, like how do I do this? I think it can be really helpful to think about what that personal touch is for you. Like what is the wake that you're leaving behind, using the boat metaphor again? Or like the aftertaste, that's like a Jim Gaffigan reference where he talks about how laughter has an aftertaste. So if you start to suss out like your conviction there and like what that looks like, I think that can be really helpful at leading you in the right direction of like how you start to do marketing in a different way that starts to both achieve your business goals and stand out. So yeah, I think Anne Hanley's been talking about this recently. She spoke about how you want to feel like you know the person that it's coming from. And by it, I mean the podcast, the video, the LinkedIn post, the article, whatever that you see out in the marketplace. So I think about that a lot. And I think that's a really good vehicle for thinking about how to start standing out in a new way and what that looks like for each person out there.
Tell us about Close. You came into this role 60 days ago. What was it like coming in? Obviously, you were influential in building Lavenderland. You spent formative years as a writer. What was it like coming into the role, and how did you think about your first 90 days?
Yeah, it's been interesting where my last 2 roles have been earlier stage in brand building. Like Chili Piper and Lavender were both, I entered around Series A, built a lot of programs as like the first content hire. And here I'm not that. I'm joining an established company, an established team where there have been content leaders. There's not been brand leaders though, so that's interesting. So we're also, like I kind of mentioned earlier, taking a new swing and a new direction of more modern marketing, focusing less on SEO, less on volume, more on value, more on customer-focused content, kind of my bread and butter. And it's been really good. It's a lot. I use the house metaphor where I think it's easier to build a new house than, I've never done this personally, it's easier to build a new house than renovate a house, right? Like, so we're kind of breaking the house down and then we're looking at, okay, we have all this material. Now we've got all this paint and screws and bricks. We have all of this new stuff. We need to collectively build a blueprint of what we want this new house to look like and then suss out what we keep, what we don't keep, and why. And we also have to bring people along for the ride, not just leadership, but the OGs on the team who have also been part of building this house. So all of that creates a lot of layers of things to think about around people management and also new strategy, how you implement it. So I say all of that to say that it's been an awesome ride so far. Great company, amazing people. It's a very different because I'm building in a different way, which probably is relatable to a lot of people out there. So I'm thinking a lot about, okay, how do we take what we've learned and what's worked in the past to learn from that and pivot forward? And everything I've talked about today are all like lessons that are very top of mind right now for me as we think about, what close looks like, now and in the future.
Yeah, we have been really trying to think about this own media portfolio and like, what are the things that live in here? And this is sort of like, to your point, moving away from a primarily SEO-driven approach, moving away from a volume approach, moving away from really a blog-first approach and embracing like the portfolio approach of like, what are the different types of things? We say short shows and moonshots, but what are the different vehicles that are going to live in this portfolio that can do different things for us? Was it hard for you going from a writer and creating a lot of blog content earlier in your career to sort of thinking more like an executive producer, showrunner, a builder of multiple projects and multiple shows and multiple things like that? Because I feel like that's one of the things that's hard for people who have a background in writing to say like, hey, I love the written word and like I do too, but I just know that that's not where the consumption levels are for our audiences right now. There's some of it, but there's a lot more consumption on video than we are creating right now.
Interesting. I would say yes and no. So I was a journalist by trade. I worked in newspapers and then I worked in magazines for several years. And in my magazine career, I was the editor of 2 magazines. So I was essentially the producer of these magazines. I had to come up with the cover. I had a lot of pressure to increase pickup rates so that the cover really had to hook somebody right away. One magazine was weekly and one was quarterly. So I was tasked kind of alone, and then I built a team to figure out, okay, what do I put on this cover so that people pick it up every single week? Kind of similar to what we do just in a digital landscape, 100%. Right? But it was so hard. So I was, effectively the creative producer, so to speak, or executive producer of this magazine every week. One of them, I actually laid it out. I threw the ads in. I created the design, wrote some of the content, managed a team writing the content, managed some help with a designer on the cover. So I was kind of end to end orchestrating this whole creative content experience every week. So I think that is also kind of lent itself into like my foundation of how I think about brand. And then I worked at a branding agency. So I cut my teeth there where I was also essentially the content producer and the executive producer of websites that I would create. So I feel like I've always had a lot of that in my career in terms of thinking through the whole experience of something. With the magazines, I would think about the magazine having a heartbeat, and I apply that to my content now, where you kind of want it to like ebb and flow, go up and down. You don't want it flatlined and you don't want it to be like peak the whole time. So I still apply that sort of thinking to how I think about content now, whether it's a virtual event, an in-person event, a blog, of like thinking about everything as a heartbeat in a way that it's like a full experience. So I worked in magazines like a decade ago, and it's funny because I think we really romanticize, especially people who've worked on magazines, like how cool they were or are, and they're obviously like utility is nowhere near as impactful as having it on your phone. But there was just something so comprehensive and visually appealing about it. And you compare that to a blog post that it's just nowhere close, right? It's not even close. And so I think we need to take more of those principles of integrating design with a blog post. And I'm not saying like make your blog post more beautiful and look like a magazine. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying like the principles of, like you said, having a heartbeat, of wanting to pick it up, of the first page mattering, the back cover mattering, the insert mattering. Like there were things that really matter. Flipping through, having visuals throughout that thing, that where do you stop? That's like where you stop on your scrolls and things like that. And like, anyways, I digress. But I think the idea is like when we're creating a show,
or a series, like we're trying to like be really thoughtful about putting things certain places. And I feel like so much content, especially B2B content, there's no thought to where anything goes. And like maybe there's like thought to like where it's laid out in your website, but like that doesn't really matter often that much either anymore because people are consuming a lot of it in feed or in app. But thinking about where the content is going and why it's going there and what's coming before it and after it is so important. And you have to do that in a magazine. And you don't know how many pages it's going to be because you don't know how many ads the salespeople are going to sell, which is a freaking crazy idea for no one who's ever worked in that. Like if it's a bad month, your salespeople sell less ads, your magazine goes from 80 pages to 60. Like, so, and if they do really well, now it's 80 pages, you have to come up with, 10 more pages of content. So anyways.
You have to fill that. Yeah. You're giving me some PTSD and
I know, right? It's like, you're like, how is
the trigger?
Like, this is such a crazy industry.
Yeah. It was so fun. But you're totally right though. Like the last thing I'll say there, like that, I think that is probably one of the most valuable marketing lessons I think that could be helpful in the industry right now, where, especially with writing, I kind of teach my team or writers in general I've ever worked with, every single word needs to earn its spot on the page. So it's like, yeah, we don't really think a lot about where certain things go, or you're just usually throw it up on the blog. But it's like, what if we created an interactive page? What if we created a unique landing page for this one type of content? Or and thinking too about magazines where you have restricted word count, where every single word needs to be valuable and really earn its spot. And I think we should think about that with everything.
Could not agree more. Chelsea, final question here. What is your best advice for a first-time head of brand and content?
I think curiosity and gut are two of the biggest things to think about as a content leader, but especially a brand leader, where you've got to be tenaciously curious, ask all of the questions, dig as deep as you can, especially for anyone who's in a similar position as I am, where I'm doing internal workshops and doing a lot of research and work to figure out what does our evolved brand strategy look like? How do we bring that to life? How do we mobilize it to market? That's really freaking hard stuff to do. Like companies pay agencies like tons of money for this sort of thing. It's really hard. But it's also really fun work, and you got to really lean into your curiosity and also your gut. Like trust your gut on certain things. That's a big journalist principle, both of those things actually. Yeah, just trusting your gut and your intuition in terms of where certain things take you. I think we don't talk enough about like vibes or instinct in marketing. Where like at Chili Piper and Lavender, for example, we had an idea of our brand, but a lot of the success came from just trusting our gut and experimenting and kind of just feeling what felt right. And you can't really put that in like a nice strategy doc, right? Like you kind of just have to go with your gut and your instinct and like what feels right. So I would say, yeah, curiosity and go with your gut.
I love that. For our listeners, you can go to close.com to learn more. I think you should stop using slow, cluttered CRMs, especially if you're a small business. So go check out Close. Chelsea, any final thoughts? Anything to plug?
Nope. Just, check out Close. So you can follow me on LinkedIn. And thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. Take care.
You're going to be great. There is no other option. You bet your ass. Tits up.
Tits up.
In today's episode, you heard from Caspian Studios CEO Ian Faison and myself, Meredith Gooderham, senior producer at Caspian Studios. Remarkable was produced this week by me and mixed by Francie Goudreau. Our theme song is Solomon by Falak. Be remarkable and rise above the noise.